Vikings fall to 5-2. They don't play well in this Thursday night game against the Rams, but they also kind of got job, didn't they? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. My hashtag everydayers, my lovely children, my comrades. Love you very much, and thank you so much for hanging out. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Vikings fall 30-20. They're 5-2 now. They've lost 2 games in 5 days after that scorching hot 5-0 start, coming out of the bye as sluggish as possible. And they lose to the Rams in a fashion that probably has some of you a little heated. Now, as you're listening to this, you're probably listening in the morning. You maybe have had the night to sleep on it, chill out a little bit. But if you missed it, the Vikings had a chance to steal one. They were down 8 points. With forever to go. They had like 96 yards to go, no timeouts, really tough stuff. I think teams are like 2-20 in that situation. But they had a chance. They had a puncher's chance, right? They had that opportunity. There is a sack in the end zone. Sam Darnold holds the ball forever, gets sacked in the end zone, but he gets dragged down by his face mask. As egregious as they come, as clear a face mask penalty as they come, there is no flag. Entire sideline goes totally crazy on the refs about it. There is no flag. That's it. Safety. 28-20 turns into 30-20. Vikings punt the ball away, and the Rams kneel it out. This is at its best an embarrassing mistake for the NFL. At its worst, it's maybe even more nefarious than that. I don't know if I'm going to go there with you, but we'll get into all of that. But before I get into this, you know my thing on ref calls, right? Bad ref calls are an unalienable reality of the NFL. They are not something that you can prevent. They are not something that you can wish away. They will happen, and they will happen to your team. And you kind of have to go in having your peace made with that, or they'll drive you crazy. You'll be on the right end of them sometimes. You'll be on the wrong end of them sometimes. And, you know, I don't like to attribute to malice what I can attribute to incompetence. And I think that basically all refs are idiots and that they are not capable of doing the job that they are tasked with doing consistently. And this has been an issue for the NFL for a while. They either need more refs or they need less reliance on those refs. This has been my deal about it. But at the end of the day, too, I'm a control what you can control guy. And the Vikings could have controlled how well they played a lot better in other ways. The defense was dreadful. The offense had a ton of penalties. We'll get into all of that. But I have a feeling the thing at the forefront of everybody's minds is, wow, the refs totally jobbed the Vikings out of a chance to go win that one. Even if it was a bad chance, it was still a chance. And while I will never say they lost that game because of refs, there were other things that had a more outsized impact on that game that they lost because of that were their own fault. I do think that they have a right to that chance. They got the stop they needed to get. They got that punt. They got the ball back with 2 minutes. They even went and tackled Cooper Kupp out of bounds as the clock was running to prevent the Rams from taking 40 extra seconds off the clock. They had earned that opportunity, and they were robbed of that opportunity. Even if that opportunity was not going to lead to a win, they still deserved to play it out. And they didn't get to because of a botched ref call. And that's the most generous way to put it, is that it was a botched, embarrassing lack of awareness by people whose whole job is to be aware of stuff. In the pool report by Kevin Seifert, he asked the white hat, Trey Blake, what could you see? The white hat had the best angle at it. He said, I couldn't see, the face mask, of course, was facing away from me, so I couldn't see if it was a face mask or not, so I swallowed the flag was basically his point. And that's a really bad point for a bunch of reasons. For one, yes, you could. There was a camera right behind you. You could absolutely see that he got twisted down by his face mask and that there was a hook in there. You absolutely could see. You're either really stupid or lying. I don't know which one is worse. This is also, by the way, the same ref that had a horrific no call in a Falcons-Chiefs game earlier this year, a pass interference no call that was also a primetime game. And if you remember a couple of years ago in the Vikings Colts 33-0 crazy game, a couple of fumbles that weren't, a couple of fumbles that should have been fumbles that both could have been returned for touchdowns that were either erroneously whistled dead or really horribly not called. This was all the same guy. This guy's had a track record to me of not just missed calls, everybody misses calls, but really, really bad ones that just aren't defensible. So I don't know if this guy is cut out for this job. I don't believe you that you said you didn't see. And if you really couldn't see from that angle, from as close as you were, you shouldn't be here. If the ref can't see, the ref shouldn't be, okay? You shouldn't be here. But there's no way to bench a ref. They don't have reserves of refs. And that's part of the problem, I think. But let's say we were to accept that, which I don't, but let's say that we were to. That, okay, the ref sneezed and missed it, and that happened. Okay. There are safeguards, fail-safes in the system to prevent this exact kind of mistake. All right? Here's the deal. Refs are old people. Refs also need to use with their live eye, they need to see things, and they are often the beginning and the end of the authority on these matters, such as a face mask. If the ref didn't see it, it doesn't get called. And to assist with that, in 2021, they added replay assist. I think replay assist should have gotten involved here. Replay assist has been a wildly successful addition. Replay assist has helped them get calls overturned very quickly without having to go through the entire challenge process and slow the game to a halt to get the proper calls in. You'll hear, oh, New York buzzed down for that one. That's replay assist. It has been fantastic operationally. It has been fantastic to getting calls correct more often. It's just been a good addition. I can't tell you why replay assist did not get involved here, because replay assist is for, and I am quoting the rule book here, the replay official and designated members of the officiating department that's New York, may consult with on-field officials or conduct a replay review or advise game officials on specific objective aspects of a play when clear and obvious video evidence is present. It does not get any more clear and obvious than that video evidence, and it does not get any more objective than the face mask rule. The face mask rule says you can't grab them by any part of their helmet, and grab, tug, twist, pull, none of that. Because of the way that face mask rules are enforced, it doesn't matter if your hand was actually on the physical face mask or if it was in the ear hole or if it was in just the the eye opening. It doesn't matter what part of the helmet you got. If you grabbed that thing and you tugged, that's a penalty. So that's another reason I don't really believe the white hat when he says, oh, I couldn't see it because the face mask. That shouldn't matter. It should have been a penalty anyways. But again, barring that, replay assist should have gotten involved here. And they did not get involved here. Now, that says that this responsibility is also used to address game administration issues, including but not limited to things like the game clock or the spot of a foul or making sure they're on the right down or penalty enforcement. Now, I believe what they mean by penalty enforcement there is like you called a 10-yard penalty, but you accidentally moved the ball up 5, and fixing that kind of issue. And replay assist can call down and say, hey, you got to put that one on the 20. But it's also very much left to be an open-ended thing that the replay booth can radio down and do what they got to do. Maybe they can't add a flag where there wasn't a flag, but why can't they do that? That feels like something that they absolutely should be able to do. And maybe some of you are going to groan and say, well, that would add so many penalties and it would slow everything down because you could call holding on every play. But if those are penalties, then you should call them. If it's holding, right? Like, that shouldn't be, we shouldn't address that issue by telling the refs to just let a few of them slide. That's just a great way to introduce bias. Instead, you shouldn't hold, maybe. Like, that's just a thing. Maybe the offense just shouldn't have the advantage of being able to get away with holding a bunch. And that would help equalize offense and defense, which people really want anyways. And the reason that all of this is really unfortunate, it would be one thing if it were just this like total meltdown catastrophe of NFL officiating on the level of the Fail Mary, by the way, which I think this absolutely rises to. I think this is a worse call than some of the most infamous calls in officiating history. This is a really bad one. But in additional context, there are rumors that I couldn't confirm, and I'm not going to say are true. You take with them from them what you will, but they are out there and being talked about, and that makes them important context for how the NFL has to address this, which is that a large majority of the money in Vegas bet on this game through various sports books was on the Vikings. And that means that the NFL betting apparatus stood to gain from maybe a bad call that benefits the Rams. I am not going to sit here and accuse that conspiracy of actually being true. But that context makes it very, very important that the NFL has a good explanation here. Otherwise, a lot of people are going to believe that conspiracy is true and lose their faith in the Shield if they had any to begin with. But if I were to tell you that's why the Vikings lost the game, I would be lying to you. So next up, we're going to talk about just what happened to that Brian Flores defense. It was really, really bad. That'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 of your favorite players, put them in a lineup, and whether they'll do better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. PrizePicks has been my favorite way to play daily fantasy this year. It's kind of the only thing outside of just watching and analyzing the games that I've actually been consistently enjoying myself. I had a lovely time with a couple of promos. There was an Anthony Edwards one earlier in the week where he just needed half a bucket, and then one from Justin Jefferson. But if you want to get in on stuff like that, you can download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode is also brought to you by Zbiotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night, then drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the next day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off of your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Moving right along with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. When you're done here, I would love it if you went and checked out patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I've got a couple of videos on the Lions game that as soon as I'm done recording here, I will make open to the public. So anyone can watch. You don't have to pay for them. About Sam Darnold against the Lions and about how Dallas Turner has been doing. He had almost a really cool play again. He's kind of still splashing in limited action, which is encouraging. And that is encouraging because, y'all, we might need this dude to have some opportunities soon. The Vikings pass rush was a complete disaster. I mean, absolutely washed away. 3 pressures on the entire game. 3 pressures on the entire game from a Brian Flores defense that's absolutely unacceptable. It hangs the coverage out to dry. There were issues in coverage as well. Before I speak out of turn too much about them, I do kind of want to wait and watch the tape and make sure that what I saw live is actually the true case. But I think we could all see that D-line was getting washed away by an offensive line that is very maligned. You go back to the crossover that I did with Doug McCain yesterday, and he was mentioning how this O-line is the problem in Los Angeles. It's this is the thing that is causing them to lose games. It is decimated by injuries. They are doing their best, but they are absolutely a liability. The other big one was not having pass catchers, but the Rams end up getting Cooper Kupp back in a kind of a surprise. They end up getting Puka Nacua back. He wasn't really supposed to be back yet, but they had some optimism. He felt good. He went in. Puka Nacua absolutely went off in this game. Cooper Kupp did not. So they got a little bit healthier, but really that O-line has absolutely no business decimating your D-line when you're supposed to be the team that is best at generating sacks. And the Vikings couldn't generate a single sack. Matt Stafford sat back there and dealt all day. That's going to expose mistakes in coverage. It's also going to expose schematic flaws. When you are, rushing 5, you've got 6 in coverage. If those 5 are not getting home, those 6 are doomed. It's how it goes. And so as we kind of go through the next week and a half and discuss possible cornerbacks the Vikings could trade for, or, should they overhaul their scheme and do different things, you have to remember that none of that will matter if you can't pressure the quarterback. If he can sit back there all day, he will carve you up. You could have 6 Darrelle Revises back there. He will carve you up. And especially somebody like Matt Stafford. I go back to the crossover and a couple of other shows that I did leading into this game, and people are like, okay, I think about what's the path to victory for the Rams? That was it. They only needed the one. And I said there are a bunch of other paths to victory for the Vikings, but the path to victory for the Rams is the one where Matt Stafford is in rhythm, where he is unbothered by the front, and that he can just kind of sit back there all day and find stuff downfield. I don't care how old and washed and how he's not the guy he used to be. I don't care when it's Matt Stafford. He can do that, and he'll be able to do. The second he can't do that is going to be the second he retires. And that was the only way you lose this game. That comes down to somebody like Jerry Tillery not being good enough, Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, the interior guys just not being good enough in the pass rush. But the Vikings don't often ask those guys to be good in the pass rush. So what I'll be interested in, I know Jonathan Grenard was kind of in and out of this game. Patrick Jones, I think, laid down a stinker. Andrew Van Ginkel, I think, laid down a stinker. Those guys on the edge did not do enough. And maybe it's time to look at that and say, well, maybe the rookie's ready. And we can try to give him some more run, because he does have, he'll play 14 snaps a game, but he will have a couple of disruptions. That's actually a pretty good clip. Maybe it's time to reinvigorate his role a little bit. But on the back end, that isn't to say the coverage is completely absolved. And what really annoyed me in this one, with, Puka Nacua absolutely popping off and Matt Stafford going crazy on him, and, Demarcus Robinson getting you for 2 touchdowns. You can't get lit up like that by Demarcus Robinson, Shaq Griffin, but Stefon Gilmore needs to turn around. That's all it is. I don't even know if this game was boy, he looks old. I mean, he is old and he played bad, so that's what everybody's going to say. But I don't know if he, didn't look fast enough. He was in phase for a lot of these, but maybe what is happening, and maybe you can attribute this to being old, maybe what has been happening, or at least in this game and in the last one, is because he's used to not being fast, he's used to playing out of phase. In phase, out of phase just means when you're a cornerback, are you running with him or are you running from behind? If you're running with him, you're in phase. And if you're in phase, that means that when that wide receiver turns around to look for the ball, you get to turn around and look for the ball. When his eyes wide or whatever tell you want for that wide, for knowing the ball is coming, you get to turn around and look for the ball, and you can then go try to make a play on it. And you have every right to make a play on that ball as the receiver does. So it's a great way to not get DPI, right? You can be physical. You can try to run through them. You can try to, work through them, jump over them, try to moss them or whatever. You have a right to the ball just like the receiver does. The out of phase way to play is usually if that receiver is going to turn and look for the ball, he's going to slow up a little bit, which gives you a chance to make up any ground you lost if they ran a good route on you and you got, right? And then you use those tells, but instead of turning around and looking yourself, which will slow you down too, you just get your hand in there. Stefon Gilmore played from in-phase positions with out-of-phase technique, and that meant he lost the ball, and guys like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua could kind of make an adjustment to a weirdly placed ball that Stafford probably placed weirdly on purpose, specifically to take advantage of this, and then get big plays. You can't play corner like that. And I get it if you're going to be out of phase a lot because maybe you've lost a step from, your defensive player of the year prime back in 2019. But if you are in phase, you still have to play like you're in phase. Otherwise, you might as well get off the field because you're playing every play like you're getting burned. Even when you're not getting burned, you're giving them the impact of you getting burned for free. That's not good enough. There was also a really, really, really bad game from Ivan Pace. Man, it was just killing me watching Ivan Pace. He guessed wrong a lot and just ended up out of position a lot. It was a game where, and I really want to check on this before I go too crazy. But it seemed to me, to my live eye, whatever that's worth to you, that he freelanced a lot, and Ivan Pace does freelance a lot, and he's allowed to freelance. See the play, go make the play. That is absolutely a thing you can do. Most NFL linebackers can do that a little bit. And it was actually unique that somebody like Mike Zimmer kind of didn't allow that and almost ran it with like college rules. No, you do your job. And it's Belichickian, and there are defenses that don't do that. But for Flores, it's all about playmaking. And so you can do that. But you can't be wrong. And when you're wrong, you give up a play. And Ivan Pace was wrong a lot and gave up a play a lot. I think they missed Cashman a little bit too. I think one of the other issues is that Metellus at inside linebacker, that's just not, like, he's like pinned there. So he's not roving around the formation like you want him to. And he's also just, a smaller player than someone like Cashman is. And that's going to get you too. So like having him just play like he's just the will linebacker. Yeah, he can do that in a rotational sense when it's part of a grander plan where we're trying to hunt a matchup or something like that. Then sure, he can hold that fort down, but every single down having him play there, issues are going to crop up eventually. It's just too likely for that to happen. It's okay to risk that a couple times as part of a grander plan, probably not okay to risk that every single play. So that's not really anybody's fault. Like, he's hurt. It's what they have to do. I get it. Think of it like a backup performance. But you're also just getting catastrophic performances on the outside and from Ivan Pace and from everybody on the D-line. Too many guys failed. And that's what it comes down to on defense. The Rams managed to put up 28 points on offense and a Fugazi safety. But 28 points on offense, all on long drives. No short fields, no turnovers, no they got set up. No, these were long, 70-ish yard drives, dinking and dunking down the field. And what is really unfortunate is against the run, after the first couple of drives where they were still feeling things out, the run was absolutely not there. The Rams were 100% one-dimensional. So guys that I've gone at here, Bullard, Harrison Phillips, Tillery, Taki Taimani, all these guys in the middle did a great job against the run and really stymied that after the first couple of plays. Perhaps ironically, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook for a reason, and that's because there's all kinds of promos and stuff that you can go find, same game parlays and stuff, but also all your classic player props, over-unders, alt lines, stack up your weird and wacky parlays. And if you want to get started, you can place a $5 bet on anything. You can place a $5 bet if you really want to emotionally hedge on the Vikings collapse. You can get plus 240 on the Vikings not to make the playoffs right now. So if the Vikings miss the playoffs, you get plus 240, 2.4 to 1 is a way to think about that. You can find that at FanDuel. Put $5 on it. And if you lose, you lose. That's fine. You still get your $200 in bonus bets guaranteed just for placing your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Make every moment more. On top of all of this frustration that you probably have with the referees and penalties in general, which is deserved, you also have this injury to Christian Dausah. At the end of the half, Christian Dausah on a very routine kind of run the play out, kind of, run the clock out kind of play. He gets sort of cut down from the wrong side on his knee, and he's down immediately, limps right into the locker room. Out with a knee pretty quickly, and now we got to wait, right? So we'll probably hear about an MRI tomorrow. You might have even heard about an MRI by the time you hear about this, or at some point over the weekend. We'll go over it on Monday, whatever that news is. But there are unfortunate realities of the present that we have to address, right? First off, what happens now? Christian Dausah is out. David Questenberry took it all. maybe if you end up unhappy with Quessenberry, who I'm going to say played like a backup, maybe you're looking at Walter Rouse there, but he has not been better than Quessenberry by any stretch of the imagination at any point in the preseason or anything. Rouse was good for a day 3 rookie in the preseason, but, up and down against twos. Like, I don't know if that's the guy. But, if Dausah's out for a long time, they probably bring somebody in, even if it's just a waiver claim to bolster their depth while they kind of promote everybody else up the depth chart. Or maybe now that becomes the thing you're looking for at the trade deadline, which would be very unfortunate because the Vikings, again, they don't have any mid-round picks. So really, they're like making a splash or doing like a 3-pick swap weird thing. But they have been looking at more of a splash than a tackle that'll tide us over for 8 games while, he's nursing an MCL sprain or something like that. Or for, the last 9 games or the last 10 games of the season, if it is a season ending injury for Christian Dausah. So we have to wait on all that. But again, there was like kind of an argument about this. I know it came up on the postcast too about like, well, why run a play there? You had 30 seconds and all 3 timeouts and you were backed up. They were backed up by a very good punt to the 2-yard line. It was a punt that ended up checking up at the 4, getting downed there, and then there was a penalty that brought them past half the distance. A penalty again. And so they were at the 2-yard. They would have had to go 98 yards in 30 seconds, but they had all 3 timeouts. And they wouldn't have had to go 98. They would have had to go, probably more like 58 to get to a kick that Will Reichard could at least swing at, right? Get to midfield, right? That was where midfield in a dome, right? Like we now know that's Will Reichard's deal. And hey, shoot, they did that in one play once last time. So the classic way to handle that is you run the ball once. Running the ball, very safe way to do that, right? You run the ball once. If that thing breaks off for a good chunk, you call a timeout. You go into 2-minute mode. If you get stopped up for 2 yards, you let the clock run. Rams probably are happy to do that too. You all go into halftime. That's like the accepted way that every team does that. And so if you're going to go, but that's too risky, if that risks injuries, if you're too worried that the called duo, a vanilla duo run risks injuries, you probably just shouldn't be watching football. You're just not, this is a blood sport and you're just not ready for that. You just go watch a non-contact sport then. That is about as safe as a play call as it gets. And it is absolutely the standard way that every team handles that situation. Unless they want to like go call a shot or something stupid like that. But like nobody kneels it out in that situation without trying a run play first. Everybody tries a run play first. So if you don't like that from a process angle and you think maybe teams should be more conservative, then sure. But you're criticizing all 32 teams and nobody's differentiated from each other. You're criticizing something that has been standard practice for decades in that situation. It's what everybody has done for as long as I can remember. So that's where I'm at on that. I think it's very hindsight. And the way, like, I think it's important for us to check in on if we're doing hindsight bias or not, right? And, ask yourself if the Vikings were on the other side of this, like with the face mask thing, if the Vikings were on the other side of this, would it still be fair to say that maybe we can change reffing procedures to make it so those kinds of things? Yeah, absolutely, right? I would feel like we got super bailed out. And in this, it's like if no injury happened, if Christian Dausah, if they just did a quick run play, and then that run play didn't go very well, it got like 3 yards, so they knelt it out the next play anyway. So if they did a 3-yard run, knelt it out, went to halftime. Would there be one word breathed about that play call? Absolutely not. You can't tell me that you would go, God, wow, they really risked a lot of injuries running that duo run. No injuries happened, but boy, they risked it. Like nobody would say that. Come on. Look in the mirror. That's impossible. So I don't think that that's the case. I think that football is a game where these things happen, and that's one of the staple runs for the Vikings. They run that one all the time. It just happens. It's bad luck. I'm sorry. There is no, boy, they could have prevented it. There's no process where we can prevent this from happening more. The only process that prevents your knees from getting cut down like that is not playing football. It's just part of the sport that we all have decided to love anyways. You got to deal with it. That's it. Very unfortunate, and that's probably the most impactful thing. Coming out of this one, it's really hard to be too mad at the offense, but I can be a little mad about the penalties, right? The Vikings had a ton of penalties on both sides of the ball. They bailed out the Rams. They had, I think, 3 different defensive stops on the same drive, all of which were nullified by a penalty. There was one defensive holding penalty that a lot of people argued with. I think the broadcast showed you a bad angle, and I think the ref actually had a better angle on that one. It looked like there was a jersey tug that you couldn't see. Looked to me like he had his hand on that jersey right at the end. Had that, and if there's a jersey tug, we can see it. We'll be able to see it on the tape because of the angle. But if there is a jersey tug, it's getting called for holding every single time, even if there isn't really an influence on the receiver. If they see jersey in your hand getting stretched back, they're calling that a million times out of a million. You had a hands to the face penalty. You had a bajillion procedural penalties on the offensive side of the ball. And it's just not acceptable to be in late October. I mean, we're coming up on Halloween and still not be able to get lined up. There was an illegal formation penalty on the Vikings in, I believe, that 2-minute drill that ended up in the Dausah thing, where they couldn't get lined up. Sam Darnold was trying to tell one receiver to go in motion and the other one went in motion too. And Justin Jefferson shrugged at it, like, what's going on here? And Darnold said, no, you go back over there. You go back over there. I think they both lined up off the ball when one was supposed to be on the ball and one was supposed to be off the ball. And it was an illegal formation. How do you not know this yet? How are you not dialed in on this yet? I mean, this is training, as Luke Inman said it on the postcast. This is week 1 training camp stuff. You line up here when there's a motion. This is who does it. Those instructions need to be crystal clear. And it's not like these guys are new. It's not like these guys are rookies. I mean, Trent Sherfield's a 3-year veteran, right? Justin Jefferson's on his second. Like, these guys have been in the league. So being unable to do that, I think, has been a consistent enough issue where they really have to look at that on the mini buy and say, what's going on here? Why can't we get this? And the answer might be that Kevin O'Connell has to bite the bullet and simplify. Take away some of the motions, take away some of the cans, make it a little bit easier for everybody to execute so that you stop shooting yourself in the goddamn foot. That's what they did a lot. But outside of the procedural stuff, they ran the ball well. I thought Sam Darnold threw a lot of really, really nice balls in this one. I don't think he was perfect. I think some of the sacks he took were his fault. I actually think the safety was his fault. We're all talking about the face mask, but I think it was a bad play by him. He's got to get rid of that thing. And so there's issues, but I don't think they outweigh the positives in terms of his contribution to the Vikings being close to winning to this game. If there are issues on the offensive line or on the offense, maybe we'll attribute them to the line, the backup tackle that's out there. But I don't think that the Vikings, I mean, the pass pro was fantastic all day. He had time to hold the ball. And when pressure came, it came really, really late in the down. And there were guys open all over the field. I thought the Vikings offense was pretty much dealing when they weren't putting themselves in horribly behind the chain situations by either penalty, horrible sack, or both. You get rid of the penalties, you get rid of the horrible sacks. The Vikings basically had a flawless day. I can be okay with that. I can't be okay with what happened on the defense. And I'm going to be heated about this ref thing for a little bit. But that doesn't mean that the Vikings' issues would have been fine if they got all the calls. Because if you overturn all the calls and you give the Vikings the right calls, sorry to break it to you, they absolutely still lose this game. So yeah, they got jobbed, but maybe they deserved to lose anyways. I will talk to you all on Monday after we've all had a little bit of time to cool off. We'll dive back into stuff. We'll have a long time to kind of evaluate this and finish evaluating the Lions game. So I'll see you all for that. And as always, Skol.